And we're continuing with the ninth chapter of Oversea Under Stone. We've pretty much had it confirmed that Mrs. Polk is not a good guy. Although she seems so nice and she makes him breakfast, Simon caught her sneaking around his room with a flashlight in the middle of the night. The kids want to go look for their clue, but Uncle Mary is asleep. They're not supposed to go out without him, and waiting at the very bottom of the road is Bill, the kid that chased Simon a chapter or so ago. Barney has decided to tell Mrs. Polk that they're going out anyway, even though he knows she's bad and will pick up there. Oh gosh! Jane bit her lip. Their night on the headland had left her more deeply nervous than ever before. It was as if they were fighting not people, but a dark force that used people as its tools and could do what it liked with them. Isn't there a way out of the house, up into the headland? I don't know. How funny, I've never looked. Well, we've been doing other things, I suppose. Even if there was one, they'd be watching it. Well, the only person who'd be likely to know about a back way is that Bill, and he's at the front. There's no harm in looking. Barney had come back with Rufus lolloping joyfully at his side. There is a way, he said. You can get through the hedge at the top of the back garden. I found it one morning before you were up. Rufus showed me. Actually, he was dashing about and suddenly he disappeared. And then I heard him barking miles away outside, halfway up the headland. You come out into a lane, and then you're out on Kamar Head before you know it. It's a good way out, because they wouldn't expect us to go through. There's no gate or anything. Gummery won't know about that way, Jane said suddenly. He'll come out the front way, and they'll follow him, and it'll be just as bad as if they'd followed us in the first place. No fear, Barney said confidently. He'll shake them off somehow. I bet you this is one time they won't have the slightest idea where we are. When the children were gone and the house lay silent, Mrs. Polk spent 2 brisk hours working downstairs. She took care not to make a noise, and she sat down in the kitchen to drink a leisurely cup of tea. She made the tea very strong, using one of the captain's best cups. Very large and made of thin, almost translucent white china. She sat at the kitchen table sipping from it, a look of great secret satisfaction on her face. After a while she went to a cupboard under the sink, pulled out her big shopping bag and took from it a brilliant jumble of colored ribbons with an elaborate feathery structure, not unlike a Red Indian headdress. She set this on her head, looking at herself in the mirror, and chuckled. Then she carefully put it aside and poured out some more tea in a fresh cup. She put this on a tray and sailed out into the hall and up the stairs, a great smiling, mysterious galleon of a woman. Without knocking, she opened the door of Great Uncle Mary's room, went in and set the tray by his bed. Great Uncle Mary was buried in the bedclothes, breathing heavily. Mrs. Polk pulled back the curtain to let the light pour into the dim room, bent down and shook him roughly by the shoulder. As he stirred, she drew back quickly and stood waiting, beaming down at him with her usual doting motherly smile. He yawned, groaned, and clutched his head sleepily, running his fingers back through the untidy white hair. "Time to get up, Professor," said Mrs. Polk brightly. "Nice long rest I let 'ee have. After all, that gadding about last night done 'ee good, I'll be bound. Not all as young as we used to be, are we now?" Great Uncle Mary looked at her and grunted, blinking himself awake. "Drink his tea now, and I'll go and get his breakfast." Mrs. Polk's rich voice flowed on as she turned to twitch the curtains tidy. Can't have can't have it in peace. Can have it in peace and blessed quiet for once. They children have been out for hours. Suddenly, Great Uncle Mary was very wide awake. He sat up straight backed, staring, a startling sight in his bright red pajama jacket. "What time is it?" "Why, 'tis gone 11. Mrs. Polk beamed at him. "Where have the children gone?" "Now don't 'ee worry about them. They can look after theirselves well enough for one day." "Little idiots! Where are they?" His forehead creased. Now, Professor," Mrs. Polk said chidingly. "Gone off to save 'ee a journey, they have, as a matter of fact. Thoughtful, well-brought-up little things they are, for all their mothers a bit higgledy-piggledy, begging your pardon. Gone off to Trutto for 'ee." "Trutto?" "Oh, Truro. Gone off to Truro for 'ee." "Truro?" Mrs. Polk smiled innocently. That's right. Young Simon answered the telephone this morning. Nasty machine, she added confidently, shuddering slightly. Near scared me out of me life, screeching away. Talked to the man at the other end for a long time, he did, and after he came to me and said, all serious, bless his heart, Mrs. Polk, he says, that was a friend of Great Uncle Mary's on the telephone from the museum at Truro, saying he's got to see us all very urgently about something. Who was it? Wait a minute now, Professor, I'm not finished. I reckon we oughtn't to go off at once if our great-uncle's asleep, young Simon says to me, and catch the bus. Then he can come after us when he wakes up. Who was it? Great-uncle Mary insisted. Simon didn't give me no name. Very important, he made it sound. So off they all went, the three of them, and got the bus into St. Austell. Don't you worry, Mrs. Polk, they said. Just tell our great-uncle for us. You should never have let them go alone, Great-uncle Mary said curtly. If you'll excuse me, Mrs. Polk, I should like to get up. Course, said Mrs. Polk indulgently. She smiled and unruffled as she sailed out of the room. Within minutes, Great-uncle Mary was downstairs, fully dressing, frowning to himself and occasionally muttering anxiously. He waved away his breakfast and went striding out of the grey house. Mrs. Polk, watching from the doorstep, saw his big battered car appear on the road and roar off, leaving a great black smear of smoke hanging in the air as it disappeared out of the village. She smiled to herself and went back into the grey house. A few moments later she came out again, the small secret smile still hovering round her mouth, locked the door behind her, and went off with her shopping bag down the hill to the harbour. A few bright red and blue feathers nodded over the top of the bag as it swung at her side. And that is the end of Chapter 9.